So that will be it for Foster Griffin. Unable to complete 7 innings today, certainly given the chance as he has been most of the season. Fans begin the applause here for Foster Griffin as they know his day is over with a second visit to the mound. Blake Butera takes the ball and pats him on the back, and Foster Griffin heads toward the Nationals dugout. Listen to this crowd here at Nationals Park. A standing ovation for the Nationals left-hander as he departs to the Nationals dugout. It's a call to the bullpen powered by Verizon. The right-hander, the rookie, Eddie Jean, gets the call. He's on his way in.
That was Foster Griffin's final appearance all the way back a couple of weeks ago. Charlie Slows on the call in that one as he left in the 7th inning in a 5-3 win over Arizona. Traded yesterday, the Nats were busy losing heading into the trade deadline, and right before the deadline, they were busy trading. We will get to all of that. Toby will join us, Toby Alzheiser, at 12 noon to discuss everything the Nats did. I'm disappointed. Feel like this has been just a horrific week after such a fun few months leading into it. The Nats lost again last night. That is 6 straight they have lost after climbing to 2 games above 500. And their position now, if you're even interested, because I don't know that they are as much as they once were, they're 5.5 out in the wild card race. Oh, by the way, James Wood got hurt last night. There's that as well. Good morning, everybody. I got this from, by the way, there are a few additions to the roster made. I'm going to get to what Washington did this morning, the player they signed and the player that will be exiting. But I got this from Cal, and I want to read this to open up the show. Kevin, Logan Paulson is your best insider, and even he isn't sure about the team in August. Any camp videos from him last summer? Doubt it. I thought the most important thing he said was the key to the season are the coordinators. Your thoughts on that, please? Yeah, he did say that. Now, he said that in a follow-up to me saying, man, you haven't talked a lot about Jaden Daniels. Isn't he the key to the season? And he said, well, of course. And then he said, but I think beyond that, it's the coordinators. And it all sort of goes hand in hand, especially with David Blau and Jaden on offense. But he essentially said David Blau and Durante Jones are going to determine the upcoming season. And I think a lot of it is just the fact that they're newcomers, first-timers, and we're not sure what they're going to do when the spotlight is on them in a real game. How will they game plan heading into it? How will they deal with game day? How will they deal with adjustments in game? All of that stuff. They've never done it before. And we've got one on each side. A lot of teams have a lot of new coordinators around the league. Washington's got 2 of them. And that's what Logan honed in on. By the way, I agree with you. Logan's so good. I really do like Logan Paulson as an analyst. I think he's excellent, and I think he delivers it in a very easy-to-consume way. I think he's really smart, and he's likable. You know, you got to have that trait if you're going to be in it for a long time. He's that, and he does some really good work on all of the Commanders' YouTube channels. He does a podcast with Grant Paulson that you can listen to. Just does a great job. And that, Cal, reminded me of something that I didn't read yesterday that I wanted to read. It was something that Dan Quinn said about Durante Jones over the weekend. Did you guys see or hear this? I'm going to read it to you. This was Saturday, the first day of fans being allowed in to watch practice, and they got a tremendous crowd. And he said this when he was asked about Durante Jones's scheme and whether or not his scheme has changed his, Dan Quinn's, perspective on defensive coaching. And Quinn said, quote, I wouldn't say it's changed perspective, but I like that he's on the front edge of some things. And so often at the line of scrimmage, offenses can have the pen last, meaning the last say in what's going to go on in the play. Who they want to check to, this change, and defensively, we just accept and adjust. Okay, that happened, we adjust. This happened, we adjust. What I like in the system that we have now is we are also into some of the checking to make the offense have to adjust. So I think in the years ahead, defenses are trying to be in that space more, and it's nice to see us go into that space now. That last line and the first part of it where he says the front edge of things is where Durante's defense is. And it's nice, and this is nice to see us go into that space now, is really very much an admission that what they've been doing the last 2 years was not front edge, was not it was not, new. What they've been doing is somewhat antiquated. Now, he didn't use that word. And by the way, Dan Quinn's defensive system is still employed throughout the league. It does take personnel, A, B, some good teaching and good coaching. And I'm not sure that they had that over the last 2 years. But he basically told you with that answer, they're doing something that he believes is more current with today's NFL, admitting that last year and the year before was not. There was a follow-up question where he was asked on what led him to believe they needed a new defensive system. And he said, quote, I just think going through offenses and defenses over the last 5-6 years, when would you want to check? A lot of times the defense might have an all-out blitz and offense checks, and you want to get out of that blitz because a screen or something could hurt you. And when could you take that further? And so defense is often trying to disguise man and zone, and that's been popular for a while. So now having the ability to get in and out of calls, it has to be easy to learn, and it's got to be relatable and something you can execute quickly. And having a system that you're able to do that, that's a big deal. He's telling you right then and there. Because remember, when he took over the defense from Joe Witt Jr., before the game in Madrid, right? I think that was the game. Right after Joe Witt Jr. had to face multiple great offenses in a row, Quinn took the defense over just in time for the Dolphins in Madrid. Now, with that said, one of the things he emphasized was simplifying it, making sure that players can play fast, making it more relatable. It was clearly not Joe Witt Jr.'s best strength to communicate and to make things relatable and easy to learn. He likes Durante Jones. We'll see what happens on the field. It's all talk in August. We'll see what happens when they actually start to play games. But he made the change, certainly when he made the change, and there was no doubt he was going to change things up defensively with a coordinator hire that was much different than the one he had. And he decided to do, in essence, the same thing on offense as well. Look, it's going to help Durante Jones as a first-time coordinator, no matter what scheme he's employing, that they've got better personnel, more likely than not, than they've had the last 2 years. It does make you wonder why after 2024, when the defense struggled so much, and there were issues for sure. Now, that next to last game, the turnovers they had in Detroit were huge. They were impactful to the outcome of that game. But then obviously they got run over in the NFC Championship game. But you wonder if he gave any thought to making that change after year one and what would have been the result last year. I thought that was interesting. I had it on my list to read yesterday and just forgot to do it because I think in essence he was admitting, we're different defensively. We have something that's less antiquated. We're new defensively, and it's going to make a big difference. We'll see. But anyway, thank you, Cal, for that. It reminded me to read that from Dan Quinn, and you're right. Logan's terrific. And, I don't know. He's part of a lot of videos, I think, actually. He's not putting out training camp play-by-play videos, but he's part of a lot of the Commanders stuff that they do on their YouTube channel and on their website. He's excellent. Santana does stuff with him. Other guys do stuff. Smoot, I think, still does stuff with him. Haven't seen any of the stuff from this summer. Is Smoot still doing stuff with them, hopefully? But they're all good. But Logan is really, really good. I had somebody tweet me yesterday to say, Cooley's won, and then Suter and Logan tied for second among my regular guests. By the way, he's not this show's insider. He is a guest who's just very good at being an insider and very good at being an analyst. But thank you for that, Cal. That was nice. So what did they do today? Well, they were busy today. They signed former Skins corner Fabian Moreau. Remember him? UCLA. I'll never forget the camp that Fabian Moreau came in on. We were down in Richmond, and we were doing the show from there every day. And I remember Doc, yes, he was a UCLA guy and the whole thing. By the way, Fabian Moreau was with Durante Jones last year in Minnesota. So he's got experience with the Durante Jones scheme. And Fabian Moreau, remember, was a bigger corner who could really run. Fabian Moreau's every bit of 6'1", 6'2", drafted in Washington, remember, in 2017. Played here for 4 years, played in Atlanta, played in New York with the Giants, played in Denver, and has played in Minnesota the last 2 seasons. I remember that camp because Doc said, we got one corner that can run. That's it, one, and it's Moreau. And I think he was right at the time. And he was not necessarily a super effective cornerback for Washington in those early years, but good enough given how bad those defenses were. But he's bigger, longer armed, kind of like Rasul Douglas to a certain degree. Every bit of 205, 210, with the ability to, with those longer arms, be in position even without necessarily the blinding speed that he may have had coming out at 22, 23 years old back in 2017. Last year played in 11 games in the Durante Jones system and ended up with some big plays here and there on a team that was obviously very good defensively. Now, with that said, Washington made another change, and the roster move that they made in addition to signing Fabian Moreau is corner Akilo Witherspoon has been placed on the reserve retired list. So I'm not sure what that's about, if he's actually retired or if they're putting him there for the time being as he tries to figure it out. You get that this time of year in training camps. You get players that have second thoughts about playing after a few days of camp, and they say, yeah, that's going to be it. There was a pretty significant name the other day that I'm blanking on who it was the other day that just retired. Do you know who I'm talking about, Max? Probably not.
For us?
It was it was around the league. It was a guy that was at one point either a first or a second round pick not that long ago.
Jalen Polk.
Yeah, Polk, the receiver from Washington.
Yeah.
Exactly. What is this, year 3 for him? He came out with a doomsday, right?
He retired at 24.
24 years old. Some guys just, they get into camp. It's like, this just continuing to do this isn't for me. So anyway, couple of things also from yesterday and today. Quinn, for anybody that was wondering, did confirm, and Ben mentioned this to us as well, that Brandon Coleman is not competing for anything other than that left guard spot with Chris Paul. So that's really where he will end up, either playing as the starting left guard or backing up and being a versatile backup that can play tackle or guard, but not center. Today, you got some guys that are taking it easy during practice, but all is well, like Laramie Tunsil's got his pads, off. They're calling these days recovery days for guys like Tunsil and Sam Cosme. But camp continues, and we are, we are exactly 10 days away from their first preseason game against the Dolphins. All right. I've got some thoughts on the Nats trades yesterday that I want to share when we come back. And Toby will join us with a breakdown of what they got back from their trading partners, including Foster Griffin going to Cleveland in more detail. But I'm disappointed with the way the Nats decided to approach this. I'll share those thoughts with you after this. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
The 2-2. Garcia gets it a ride. Deep right field. Welcome to the Bronx, Luis. Yankees lead.
Luis Garcia Jr. in his first game in New York last night, a seventh inning 2-run shot that gave the Yankees, in the moment, a 7-6 lead. They ended up losing the game 13-7. After that bottom of the seventh 2-run homer that gave the Yankees a 7-6 lead, in the top of the next inning, the eighth inning, St. Louis scored 7 runs to take a 13-7 win, which is where it ended. Garcia Jr. in his first game with the Yankees, 2 for 4 with that homer and those 2 RBIs on that homer. For him, that is home run number 24 on the season. He's got 78 RBIs, and he's been literally on fire since the beginning of June. They traded him on Sunday. Yesterday came the news that the Nats, prior to the deadline, traded Foster Griffin to Cleveland in exchange for a package that netted the Nats 4 players, pitchers, Will Dion, Josh Hartle, and Kendalis Vergez, and outfielder Nick Mitchell. They also made one other trade yesterday. They traded Christian Franklin. Technically, this was a move, trading him to the Orioles in exchange for a minor league right-handed pitcher. So the Nats incredibly busy over the last couple of days. James Wood was injured last night. I guess we'll find out more about that today. But man, did this season go south in a hurry. And we kind of saw the possibility with the schedule, the way it was setting up right at the trade deadline. After they came out of the All-Star break with a series win in Sacramento against the A's, a series win against Colorado, a series win, a big one, a crucial late July series at home against Arizona, winning 2 of those 3. And then they dropped 2 of 3 to Toronto on their way to Atlanta, where they got swept. And then last night in the first game in Philadelphia, they lost 6-3, and they've now lost 6 games in a row. And from that spot when they beat Toronto 1 week ago today to climb to 55-53, Cade Cavalli pitched very well. They won that game 8-6. In that game, Garcia was outstanding. He had a homer and 2 RBIs in that game. C.J. Abrams was on an absolute tear offensively. Even without Curtis Mead, the Nats were a lethal offensive baseball team. And they certainly lacked pitching, but we thought certainly there was an opportunity 1 week ago for them to get to the trade deadline where they had a good enough record where maybe they would hold off, management would hold off making all of these deals. I think there was always a chance based on, the conversations and the things I've read. And look, you guys know this. There are people obviously much more day-to-day in tune with Nats thinking, but in following it certainly over the last month, it did become more clear that the 2 guys, or the guy that was potentially going to be dealt more than anybody else, was Garcia Jr., just because he was having a career year, 26 years old. He was going to command a lot in return. But would they do it because it would be a blow to the highest scoring team in baseball if they did it? And then the Foster Griffin thing was very much in the air. I think personally, Foster Griffin's still pitching here in Washington if Washington's 2 games over 500 or even 500, and they split with the Braves over the weekend. I think he's still here, and maybe there's a chance Garcia Jr. is still here. But Garcia Jr., for a lot of the people that cover the team, was always lurking as a possibility if they got a good enough deal. They got 4 right-handed pitchers for Luis Garcia. We had Jesse Doherty on the show yesterday, and Jesse said none of them are like super high up on the list prospects for the Yankees, but they're, prospects that the Nats really feel like they can develop. I guess for me, in watching this team, especially really getting involved over the last month, it was nice to watch a team that you thought had a chance to win. And by the way, win in a way, and this is never important to me with my favorite teams, how they win. Like, oh, I really would prefer them to be exciting if they're going to win. I don't care how Washington's football team, NBA team, or baseball team win, as long as they win. But it was exciting. They were really, really juiced up offensively. And I mean that in the best of ways. I mean, every night they were crushing the ball, and they were getting it from so many different spots. I mean, you look at, the Nats statistically, CJ Abrams, let's just see if he's still leading the league in RBIs. Yeah, he's still leading the league in RBIs. They had two guys in terms of James Wood and CJ Abrams, and they still do, in the top 8 in home runs. Garcia, by the way, is in the top 11 in home runs. They just were really a team that was difficult to keep from generating a lot of hits and a lot of runs. And then with Foster Griffin coming out of nowhere, much more so than even Luis Garcia Jr., who's been on the squad for a while, never has had a season like this one, but he did hit 16 home runs last year. It's not like he's been, a nothing player and then all of a sudden blew up. This is clearly his best year, don't get me wrong, but it's not the equivalent to what Curtis Mead did this year. That was out of nowhere, like Foster Griffin was out of nowhere. And certainly if somebody said 3 months ago, hey, man, you're going to get, at the trade deadline for Curtis Mead, Luis Garcia, and Foster Griffin, you're going to end up with Connolly Early, a legitimate starting left-hander. You're going to get 3 or 4 relievers and another 4 to 5 potential future starters. You'd say, oh, my God, sign me up. But context is everything, because I'd much rather them be 500 right now, 2.5 games out of the wild card spot, and have Foster Griffin and Luis Garcia Jr. still on the team. Luis Garcia Jr. is having a season, man. A season. Why? I guess at some point, for me, when you're kind of a mid to smaller market team in the way you operate, I think you get better, certainly thinking long-term to a certain degree, but when the opportunity strikes, you get better trying to win. And I just feel like the losing streak probably was the death knell here. And the team could have avoided some of this had they won a couple of games in Atlanta. But sometimes trying to win is the best way to get better. And what they just did is they just buried the season with these moves. They have one quality starter in Cade Cavalli. They might get Connolly Early at some point later on this month. They just gave up one of the hottest hitters since June 5th. First in OPS, second in OPS, first in slugging percentage, tied for first in home runs, tied for third in RBIs since June 5th in Luis Garcia Jr. The tear that he and CJ Abrams in particular have been on, there was a chance for the Nats to be in this thing until the end. Everybody's got a losing streak they can point back to. And this could have been hey, we hung in there even after getting swept in Atlanta, and look at how it paid off. We bounced back with a solid series against Philadelphia, Cincinnati, and Cubs. And by the time we got back to mid-August, we were sitting there a game. And for the final month of the season, we had a legitimate shot to make that wild card spot, one of the two in the National League. But they just went from gaining some relevance in the marketplace with fans who have been lying dormant for a while to completely irrelevant. I know that there's a really good chance that what they did is absolutely the smart thing for the long term. And obviously, in looking back from 2012 to 2019, those 8 seasons where they were in the playoffs 5 times and they won a World Series, and the way they built up to that. I understand that there is a process here. This team's been irrelevant since 2019. Terrible, terrible luck with COVID in 2020 coming off the first World Series in franchise history since 2005. Obviously, you have the 1925, 1933, the appearances in the World Series way back 100 years ago. But that was a parade, and they were unable to take advantage of it. You know, all of those economic studies about a first-time World Series winner in a market and what it does to the team in terms of increased ticket base, increased revenue from sponsorships, increased merchandise sales, et cetera. The Nats couldn't even have the celebration at the stadium because there were no fans allowed. It was terrible luck, not to mention the learners are in the commercial real estate business and no one was going into work anymore. I mean, it was a terrible, terrible time to have won the World Series. If it had happened 2 years earlier, they would have been in a financial boon situation. So I get what happened there. And they've operated the team in a way in which obviously it's not Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers, Phillies. But man, this was an opportunity that just kind of came out of nowhere. And I wish they could have just hung on for one more week, won a couple more games. I really do think sometimes because there are no guarantees that what they just pulled off with those trades are going to pay off. I mean, I get it's a new regime. You got to trust them. And maybe they saw the writing on the wall. Maybe they saw, look, this is who we really are against Atlanta in this series. We're not actually going to be in contention a month from now or a month and a half from now. It was a nice, April through end of June or through end of July, but now the rubber's meeting the road on who we really are. And maybe they saw that. And maybe certainly if they had kept everybody falling apart and missed the playoffs by 6-7 games and didn't take advantage of at least the Foster Griffin situation because he's going to be a free agent. But man, Luis Garcia Jr., how do you know this isn't the beginning of a 3, 4, 5-year run of being a big-time hitter? At 26 years old, he's not 30. Did it in New York last night. Just occasionally, I'd like to see our teams, specifically the Nationals and the Wizards, and I know the Wizards are about to do it. Sometimes the best way to learn how to win is to try and to keep trying to win. With that said, hopefully everything they did and the haul they got back works out. Be interesting to watch Foster Griffin in Cleveland to see if this was just a one-year aberration. And the same with Luis Garcia Jr. and Curtis Mead. They know a lot more than I do, for sure. But will be sad and that this is now kind of over with a 6-game losing skid, more against the Phillies. They still have, games against, they got a bunch of games with the Marlins who have played well. They got to play the Dodgers out there. They got to play St. Louis and the Padres. At this point, the Nats might end up being 10, 12 games under 500 when we get to the end of the season. I also think real quickly, because in looking at what they got back, some of those prospects are much closer to the bigs, and we'll talk to Toby about this at 12, that it did occur to me that maybe they think they're close and that over the next 2 years they can legitimately contend for a playoff spot with some of the acquisitions they made. Some of these acquisitions are going to be ready sooner rather than later. And some of them won't be. All right, we'll get back to football. Kevin Sheehan Show next on the Team 980. I said the other day that and I was embarrassed to say it because most of you were going to think that it was because I'm a big Kirk Cousins fan. That's part of it. But I said that I think one of the teams that, may be a little bit under the radar and a team that might end up being better than people think are the Las Vegas Raiders. I think their overall depth chart is more impressive than people think. They've got some defensive talent. They added Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker and Kwity Paye to Max Crosby in that defense, added Teron Johnson in that defensive backfield. They've got a guy that could be the best tight end in the league in Brock Bowers. Ashton Genty was, a top 5 pick a year ago in 2025. Didn't have much of an opportunity, but they upgraded their offensive line by adding Jackson Powers Johnson and Tyler Linderbaum at center. And they've got a veteran quarterback who actually, once he came in for Michael Penix Jr. last year, more than a year now removed from the Achilles injury, the last year in Minnesota, Kirk played well at the end of last year. It really had a sort of a big game late in the season when he went to Tampa Bay on a Thursday night and beat the Bucs, throwing for 373 and 3 touchdowns. It was a devastating loss for the Buccaneers. That was a huge comeback. They were down 14 in the fourth quarter. Kirk brought him back. He played well. He actually had some really good games and looked like he had looked right before the Achilles injury in Minnesota, which was perhaps the best football he had played during his career. They seem hell-bent on Kirk being the starting quarterback. Tom Brady, as an owner of that team, doesn't want that Raider new quarterback in Mendoza to play much at all this first year, wants him to sit and learn. There are stylistic similarities between the two quarterbacks. Mendoza's bigger, he's more athletic, but the way they play is somewhat similar. But Mendoza's never played from under center. He's never played in a scheme like the one that Clint Kubiak is putting together. And look, Kubiak and Cousins together in Minnesota was quite the pairing. Kirk was good with all of his offensive coordinators in Minnesota, but Kubiak was one of his favorites. And I said, I actually think the Raiders, I know they're in a tough division with Kansas City, Denver, and the Chargers, but I think this could be a competitive football team. We'll see. They're going to play the games. Clint Kubiak had, and this is my what do you got, had an odd description of his team's roster yesterday. Listen to the way he described the guys he has in his locker room.
I think we just have a professional group of players. They care about getting better. We don't have any turds. We got guys that want to be here, that want to win, that want to change this place. And so I'm really happy with that.
We don't have any turds. Seems like such an 80s term. You know what that term is, obviously. Everybody knows what that term is. But, Max, how often do people your age use that description of somebody who's kind of a problem or a lowlife?
I'll be honest.
Or a jackass.
It's been a couple years, at least, since I have heard somebody throw around the verbiage turds when referring to people they don't want
Turd in the punch bowl is something that's used quite often.
Yes, I've heard that much.
The proverbial turd in the punch bowl. Yeah, that was an interesting description. But I'll tell you what, over the years, when you've been in our business, you get lucky enough to have conversations and even develop relationships with people. Man, I'll tell you one thing you learn from a lot of these, guys that are in position to make decisions is they can't stand the pain in the asses. They want a locker room full of people that want to be there, that love football and are pros. And yes, talent gets in the way of that on occasion. You're going to have to put up with some, as Clint Kubiak calls them, turds when they are extremely talented and help your team on the field on game day. But, man, being coachable, being somebody who is not being coachable and having some self-awareness and thinking team first and loving ball man, that's what they're looking for. You know, when they're doing all those interviews, they're trying to identify the turds that they don't want in their locker room. Unless that particular turd is extremely talented. Yeah, that was an interesting way to put it. Yeah, I mean, you look at that Raiders roster. Obviously, Cousins has been an absolute pro in every locker room he has been in. Max Crosby is an absolute pro. And, you know, they've got other guys as well. I don't really know the kind of people. Colton Miller, I know they're left tackle. Connor Haywood, they've got, you know, on that team. Brock Bowers seems to be a pro. But, yeah, it matters, but ballers matter too. You're not going to give up on an extreme game-changing type of player because he's a jerk. Man, this franchise for all of those Snyder years, man, he found the jerks. They didn't seem to bother him. Hey, Mike Sando has his quarterback list out. He does it every year where he interviews 50 NFL executives. This year, the executives included 8 general managers, 5 assistant GMs, 5 former GMs, and 3 other executives, plus 9 head coaches, 10 defensive coordinators, 5 offensive coordinators, 2 offensive assistants, 1 defensive assistant, and 2 coaches specializing in analytics and game management. 21 execs and 29 coaches overall. And they were asked to vote on 35 veteran quarterbacks and place them into 5 tiers, tier 1 being the best, the worst being tier 5. And then the quarterbacks in this Mike Sando poll in The Athletic, they were ranked by the average vote and placed into tiers. There's a tier 1 group of quarterbacks, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and tier 5. What'd you say?
We only got 4 tiers this year.
Oh, there wasn't a quarterback in the tier 5?
No.
I didn't get down that far.
We have
last
35
year,
players
let me just
listed.
mention, last year, the 2025 list had in tier 1, Mahomes, Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Matt Stafford. And then the first quarterback in tier 2 was Jaden Daniels. And tier 2 was last year described as a quarterback who can carry his team sometimes, but not as consistently. He can handle pure passing situations in doses and or possesses other dimensions that are special enough to elevate him above tier 3. He may have a hole or two in his game. So Jaden was number 6, top of tier 2 last year. Where is he this year? Well, let's go down the list, right? Tier 1 quarterbacks are described as carries his team each week. The team wins because of him, expertly handles pure passing situations, has no real holes in his game. Number 1 on the list, still Patrick Mahomes. This is, like the ESPN list, except just for quarterbacks. And he's got a lot more of just his voters were just GMs, assistant GMs, and coaches, whereas the ESPN list had a lot of scouts as well voting. Just telling you the difference between the top 10 list for each position group that ESPN put together and the tiered quarterbacks in The Athletic with the Mike Sando study. Patrick Mahomes was 1, tied for 2, Josh Allen and Matt Stafford. Number 4, after a tie for 2 with 2 players, Joe Burrow. And those are your tier 1 quarterbacks. No other tier 1 quarterbacks. 4 of them. Mahomes, Allen, Stafford, and Burrow. Tier 2 carries his team sometimes, handles pure passing situations in doses, has other dimensions that elevate him above tier 3, has a hole or two in his game. Lamar Jackson was at the top of tier 2. That's where Jaden Daniels was last year. Followed by Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott. Drake May tied for 8th with Jared Goff, Jordan Love, Brock Purdy tied with Caleb Williams, and then Jaden Daniels at 13, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold at 14. Where does tier 3 start? Those are a lot of tier 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah, there are.
Let me go through the tier 2 quarterbacks again, okay?
We've got a turd in the punch bowl.
Yeah. Let's go through the tier 2 quarterbacks again. After Mahomes, Allen, Stafford, and Burrow, it's Jackson at 5, Herbert at 6, Prescott at 7. Tied for 8, Drake May, Jared Goff. Jordan Love at 10th, tied for 11th, Brock Purdy and Caleb Williams. 13th, Jaden Daniels. 14th, tied Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. 16th, Trevor Lawrence. 17th, Jalen Hurts. So they got 17 quarterbacks to start the list, 4 in tier 1, 13 in tier 2. Then their tier 3 list, Bo Nix, Aaron Rodgers, C.J. Stroud, Daniel Jones, Bryce Young, Kyler Murray, Jackson Dart, Cam Ward, Tyler Shuck, Tua, Cousins, and then you get to tier 4. They've got Malik Willis, Geno Smith, Deshaun Watson, Michael Penix Jr., Jacoby Brissett, J.J. McCarthy, Shadur Sanders. So Jaden at 13. I want to read some of the things that were said about Jaden Daniels. It is, man, a recency bias evaluation every year, no matter who's doing the evaluating. Jaden Daniels, one defensive coach. He's got to reprove it. By the way, he got one tier 1 vote, 32 tier 2 votes, and 17 tier 3 votes.
I would like to thank the
Daniels
number 1 tier 1 voter.
What'd you say?
I would like to thank the one person who voted tier 1. I appreciate them greatly.
Yeah. Let's see if the others got any. Yeah, like Caleb Williams didn't get one tier 1 vote. Purdy did.
Ugh.
Jordan Love did. Goff did. May did. May got 5 tier 1 votes.
Ooh.
Okay. Here's what is written about Jaden Daniels. Daniels proved as a rookie he can be one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the game. His second season amplified durability questions that followed him into the league. He's got to reprove it, a defensive coach said. Daniels missed 10 games to injury in his second season and wasn't nearly as dynamic, while Washington posted a 2-5 record in the games he did start. I think he is a legitimate ascending 2, assuming his health is right, an offensive coach said. Daniels suffered the 3rd largest year-over-year drop after Geno Smith and Tua Tagovailoa. This from an executive in the league. Quote, I think he was a little quick to take off and run last year. They spent a lot of money on that offensive line and drafted some guys. So I think he's just got to settle into that position. He has all the talent. Calibrating the dual threat factor in a manner that threatens defenses without threatening Daniels' physical well-being is the key. This from an offensive coach. Quote, Jaden is similar to Lamar in that when he can't run, he's a tier 3 quarterback. My issue with him is he takes too many hits and he gets away with missing plays because his feet can bail him out. Closed quote. Daniels will have a new first-time coordinator in David Blau, who replaced Cliff Kingsbury. One exec said, quote, do they get under center? Do they slow down? Do they do some other things? Jaden was really, really good in terms of his authority to make plays both on and off schedule. It's extremely difficult to defend guys who can do both. So I think they've got a chance for a real bounce back. So that's the write-up on Jaden Daniels. Want to hear what he was like last year, according to all of the front office execs in the league after his rookie year? Yes, recent impressions matter. Get to that next. Also, the question of the day as it relates to the football team during training camp for all of you to ponder, and that is, who's this year's breakout player? Who's the player that hasn't done it yet who breaks out this year? Not a guy that they just acquired that's done it somewhere else. Somebody who hasn't done it that breaks out and becomes a player that everybody around the league knows about. 301-230-0980. We'll take your calls on that. I've got a couple of prospects for that. So does Max. We'll get to that after this. Kevin Sheehan Show. The Team 980, the team980.com. Don't forget you can watch this show on our Team 980 YouTube channel. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button when you get there. 301-230-0980. Who's Washington's 2026 breakout player? A player that suddenly performs at a much higher level than they've ever performed at before. You can take a player who's been an average player, a player who's even played well, and say this is going to be, an all-pro, Pro Bowl kind of a season, his breakout season. You can take somebody who's barely seen the field and said, this player has been a backup to the backups, and he's going to actually be a major contributor to the team this year. 301-230-0980. I'm gonna hit you with a couple of names because I've mentioned them a few times. I feel really good about two players this year and their opportunity and then their talent to sort of match it. And I think the fit in the schemes. I'll start on offense, but Chig Okonkwo has not been to a Pro Bowl. Chig Okonkwo has not been a household name in this league as a tight end, not even close. He has been buried in Tennessee, playing 17 games a season. The most catches he's had was last year, 56 catches for 560 yards, 2 touchdowns. The most touchdowns he's had in a year was 3 his rookie season. He's got 8 touchdowns total for his career in 4 years. Chig Okonkwo is a guy that I think is a legitimate pass-catching tight end in a good offense with a good quarterback where he is featured and gets the targets. If he gets the targets, I think this guy could easily end up with 75-plus catches, which would be easily a record for him, and to push 900, 1,000-plus yards and 6, 7 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns on a year, to actually be in consideration to be a Pro Bowler, to be a potential All-Pro. Look, there's some good tight ends in this league. There's some good tight ends in the NFC. I think Chig Okonkwo is going to be a name that people know. In free agency, you had to be a hardcore NFL fan to know who Chig Okonkwo was. Most did not. He's number one on my list. 301-230-0980 if you want to give me your number one candidate to break out in 2026. Again, a player who suddenly becomes much more than he was before. It's that simple. From average to great, from obscure to significant playing time and a significant contributor. The other one I've mentioned multiple times, and I'll mention again, is Nick Cross. Nick Cross hasn't been a star in Indianapolis. By the way, like Chig Okonkwo, a Maryland guy, A. B, a guy that just doesn't miss games. He missed 1 game as a rookie, and he's played 3 straight years of playing all 17 games. Doesn't have a Pro Bowl appearance. Isn't on any list of the best safeties in the game. Nobody really knew who Nick Cross was in free agency. The casual fan and even the hardcore NFL fan probably didn't know a lot about Nick Cross. I think he is exceptional as an in-the-box tackling safety. He's very high IQ. He is versatile, and I think the scheme will fit him well. Those are the 2 players for me. Chig Okonkwo and Nick Cross are going to be 2 players that we're talking about next year where everybody knows who we're talking about around the league. Like the top 10 tight end list, maybe not in the top 10, but honorable mention, Chig will be on the list. Nick Cross might not be a top 10 safety on the ESPN top 10 list this time next year, but he'll be honorable mention. Both have a chance to have good seasons, and it would make sense that they do. Year 5, starting to come into their prime, perfect opportunity, good fit scheme-wise. They'll be featured, certainly Chig will, and these guys don't miss games historically. They're going to be available. They're going to be out there. There are a couple of others that I wrote down, but those are my top 2. Go ahead, Max. Who do you got?
So this player has not been mentioned yet, and there are a lot of additions along the defensive end of this ball, or defensive side of the ball, on this portion of the line. I think Johnny Newton is going to be a breakout guy, or is a breakout candidate for me going into this year. A lot of additions, like I said, with Charles Omenihu, Caleb Chason, Odafe Owe, all these guys. I think that Johnny Newton's going to benefit greatly from that. There are a lot of concerns with Deron Payne, how he's going to perform this year. I hope that we get contract year Deron, but I'm not entirely sure. But Johnny also said something in the offseason about a big confidence boost that he kind of got in that 3-sack game he had against the Cowboys on Christmas. Year one was a little rough. He was trying to just kind of build his strength back.
3-sack game against the Cowboys on Christmas?
Yeah, he did.
He did?
Yeah, he did. And people forgot about it
God.
immediately. But
I mean, I'm now remembering it a little bit, but if you had said to me, name the guy that had a 3-sack game on Christmas against the Cowboys, I would never have gotten Johnny Newton.
Yeah, me neither until I started
but
thinking
we
about it more.
But we were excited about it in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And year one for him, I think he was just still trying to work back because he got double foot surgery. Working back from that is next to impossible. And then the next season was him basically another rookie year for him, getting comfortable with his body again. So I think towards the end of year two, he was getting a lot of that confidence back. So year three, a healthy offseason, a new scheme that I think he's going to benefit greatly from with his speed and his power. I really think that Johnny Newton can get a lot of stuff done for this defensive line this upcoming season. So he's my guy to watch.
I like that one. I like that one a lot. I had him on my larger list. They had 6 sacks in that game against Dak Prescott on Christmas Day. They didn't win the game. They were in the game. Josh Johnson, remember, was the starting quarterback. But my God, Johnny Newton had 3 sacks. Yeah. All right, 301-230-0980. We've got a line open if you want to jump on. Who's the player on Washington's roster that you think will break out in 2026? A player who suddenly performs at a much higher level. That can be from obscurity to significant contributor. That can be from average to great. That can be from good to elite, if you want to do it that way. 301-230-0980. Let's start with Ross in Tampa. Ross, go ahead.
Kevin, what's good in the hood?
What's up, Ross? How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you for taking the call. I appreciate it. So I called Max with one guy, but as I was waiting, my mind changed, but I'll talk about him anyway. Ben Sinnott, this year with the new offense that they got going on, I think it'll finally be what we expected, which was Adam Peters' vision, not Cliff Kingsbury, where he can be that fullback / H-back tight end. It just sucks that he doesn't have like that last name when he makes a play that the fans can just, you know what I'm saying, like Cooley or Juszczyk, you know what I'm saying? But no, this guy right here, he's not even a lock to make the team right now, but it's kind of, you heard it here first. You guys can write it down if you want.
I think Sinnott's a lock to make the team, don't you?
No. The main guy.
Oh, okay. You're getting to your next player. My fault. Yeah.
You're good. You're good. Drew Stevens. I forgot what game it was last year.
Ooh.
It was raining. It was cold.
Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon. Yeah. I'm like, oh my goodness. When we got him, I'm looking back at his kicking in Iowa. I think he makes a team. I think if it's neck and neck between he and Jake Moody, they're going to go with the younger, cheaper option, upside. If you guys have kickers in your fantasy football league, he'll be the first one off the board in about 3-5 years. You heard it here first. Drew Stevens wins the kicking battle. He makes a team, and he's going to be that breakout player to where, like, it's a close game. You see him warming up, and you know he's going to make that field goal. He's going to have that confidence, man. I feel it in my bones.
That would be interesting. I mean, there have been rookie kickers, but more often than not, kickers have to fail a few times before they end up somewhere in a spot where it works for them. And maybe this is the spot for Jake Moody, being in Washington after being in San Francisco, Chicago. Remember, he had the game winner on Monday Night Football against Washington last year. Yeah, Drew Stevens had a game against Oregon on just one of those, late October rain, seeing every player's breath at the line of scrimmage where it's, 35 degrees and gray and he hit one big kick after another. Kevin in Arlington. Kevin, go ahead. The player that you see breaking out in 2026.
Hey, Kevin, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I think it's going to be the most talented young player in the secondary. I think it's going to be Trey Amos. I think he can do it all. I think he's a true boundary corner. I'm not going to say he's a shutdown corner. Way too early for that. But I think he just checks all the boxes. And, of course, your good friend Sean Springs, I believe, said the first time he saw him, he knew he could play. I like Trey Amos to be sort of the best young player in the secondary. I hope I'm right.
You know what's interesting about corners is that historically, they have needed some time. It's a difficult position to play at the NFL level. You're required to do a lot more. Coverages are different in the NFL. Schemes are different. Every play is different. You're not necessarily in star treatment, just following the best receiver around the field. But what's interesting, Kevin, as I say that, in recent years, we've seen explosion early in their careers from guys like Pat Surtain, from Christian Gonzalez, from Derek Stingley Jr., from Witherspoon in Seattle, Quinyon Mitchell in Philadelphia. It hasn't taken a lot of time in recent years for corners. So, I think like Sauce Gardner, even with the Jets, it was pretty obvious early on. So I think that I have fallen into the old school, the way it was sort of described to me by people. Corner's a tough position to learn. You got to give it time. Sean Springs used to say that. You got to give it time. It's not running back where you just plug and play. There's a lot of thinking at the position. There's a lot of adjusting. And yet in recent years, man, these guys have come into the league, and within 2 years, they've been stars. So we'll see if Trey Amos is going to be, one of those upper tier corners. Maybe we don't have to wait as long. I'm looking through the list. I just pulled up the list of the top 10 corners on that ESPN list. Listen to this. Literally, Surtain was good immediately. Stingley Jr., pretty much immediately. Gonzalez, good immediately. Devin Witherspoon, good immediately. Quinyon Mitchell, some of these guys I just ripped off. They're all on the top 10 list. Sauce Gardner's all the way down. Cooper DeJean, good immediately as a rookie. So hopefully we can see it from Trey Amos here in year 2. And I think we saw some of it last year. I think he showed some ability for sure. All right, 301-230-0980. Kevin, thanks for the call as always. 301-230-0980. We've got an open line or two if you want to jump on. I want the player that's going to break out, the player that you believe is going to jump into a totally different category of player in 2026 from our roster. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. I do want to mention that Window Nation right now is offering 50% off of everything. And that means not just windows, but doors as well. Yeah, Window Nation sells doors too. If you've been thinking about new windows or new doors to beautify your home or to make it more in your home insulated, keeping that cool air in the summer in your home, not out of your home, the warm air in during winter time, lowering your utility costs, now's the time to reach out to Window Nation. Call them at 866-90-NATION. You can go to windownation.com as well. Mention my name and just tell them you want an in-home estimate. It's free of charge, no obligation, no pressure. They'll schedule it for you when it's convenient for you. They'll be in and out of your home in an hour or less. You'll actually find out which windows in your home need to be replaced or which doors in your home need to be replaced. Window Nation offering half price on everything. And right now, with their financing package, no money down, no monthly payments, and no interest charged for 2 full years. 866-90-NATION is the phone number. Please let them know that I told you to call. You can also go to windownation.com. So this show's been an interesting show today. I'm not going to let everybody completely behind the curtain, but just a little bit off in certain little bit off in certain areas. Sometimes, technology can get the best of you. But the good news is what I sound like in my own ears, I don't sound like to most of you, which is great. But I was just telling Max that last night I watched the World Series of Poker until 1 a.m. I've never been a poker player, okay? Have I played poker? Yes. Have I played poker in a casino? Yes. Is it my favorite thing to do in a casino? No. I'm a blackjack and craps player. I don't think there's anything more exciting in a casino than a super hot dice table. I mean, there's just nothing like it. And I love sitting there with good groups and friends, whether it's at a card table, blackjack table, or playing craps. You can do it for much longer and with less stress. Obviously, playing blackjack, craps it's my favorite, but it's not for everybody, and I understand why. But I've never been a poker player. It just kind of missed me for whatever reason. I have friends that got into it. I don't. Most of my friends, though, prefer when we are in Vegas or even the occasional infrequent trip to the Borgata or somewhere in Atlantic City, or the MGM here. They'd prefer to play cards. They'd prefer to play blackjack or craps. But I have sat in a poker room before. The last time I sat in a poker room, I was in Costa Rica last summer. And my son was with me and my brother. We decided to go play poker at a casino in San Jose, Costa Rica at about 11 o'clock at night. And we were there. It's still 3:30, 4 in the morning. And then I decided to go back, and my brother and my son stayed until, I don't know what time it was. They did well. But last night, the World Series of Poker was on. It was night one of the main event, the main table. And it got me. It sucked me in. I've seen the World Series of Poker. I've watched it occasionally, but I've never really been sucked into it. And last night, man, I got sucked into it. And I was like, when are they going to stop this first night? Because you only had, of the 9 at the table, only one got eliminated before I finally turned it off. I don't know what time it ended up ending. But there were some personalities there, a lot of boring hands, but you're just waiting for that one riveting sort of hand to come up. That's what I was doing last night. Yeah. It looks like 2 players got eliminated last night. The first player, the guy was from Cyprus, I think. And then did Feng get? No. Oh my God. How did he get to that chip level? Wow. All right. Nobody else probably watched it. It'll be on again tonight. Are you a poker player, Max?
Not. No,
Okay.
I won't claim to be, but I have played and do enjoy playing. But sitting down in a poker room, no, I can't do it.
No.
Too intense for me.
Oh, really? See, to me, the camaraderie of a poker room with, at a poker at a table, that's the fun part of it. I just haven't done it enough to really get to the point where it's truly an addiction. That's probably a good thing because I do have that kind of a personality. But last night and watching it, the only thing I could think of is next time I'm in Vegas or in Atlantic City, or maybe even at the MGM, I might walk into the poker room and sit down for a little bit, see how it goes. Kenny in Charlotte. Kenny, who's the breakout player on our football team in 2026? Go ahead.
What's up, Kev? I'm going to say Bill, simply because the scheme, his one-cut burst ability, and how it's going to help Jaden. I know the offensive coordinator wants to be run heavy in order to protect Jaden, and I think even Jaden's the threat of his legs on the boot and things like that. I think nationally, Bill is really going to become a name after this season.
I think that's a good one, too. And I actually wrote his name down. I wrote a couple of names down here. But the reason, to your point, there is talent there. There's no doubt there's talent there. I actually also think the scheme ultimately could really benefit him. I think he is definitely one of those zone run, feel, vision type of runners with obviously some explosiveness, with a quarterback who will have to be focused on by the defense, and with I think, a decent offensive line in front of them. I think one of the keys just to their offense in general is, that receiver position. They've got to really push the defense to cover a lot of the field, without the true vertical threat beyond Terry. And I think Terry's still a good vertical threat. But to have that real speed threat, like imagine they had Rashid Shaheed. I was just thinking about other guys that were out there. Now he opted to stay in Seattle, but to have a guy like Rashid Shaheed on this roster would have been huge, to have that kind of speed threat. But you just don't want, teams to not fear crowding the box. That's all. And I think that that's probably why they were looking to upgrade at wide receiver, looking to add some speed with Alec Pierce or Dobbs, interested for a moment in Brandon Ayuk, and may still be interested in a Stephon Diggs, even though I don't think that's really what Diggs is anymore. But I could see that. I could see Krosky Merritt, becoming that. Here's my issue with Krosky Merritt. I think Rachaad White's going to be the primary back, getting the majority of snaps early in the season. And I say that because, first of all, he's an all-around back right now, and Bill isn't. Now, maybe Bill will prove to be an all-around back this year. He'll be a better pass catcher. He'll be a better pass blocker. Those are always, difficult things for rookie running backs to be. Remember, too, he had not really played football in 2 years because he was ruled ineligible, at the beginning of his season at Arizona after transferring from New Mexico. So I think Rachaad White also, when they go on the road to open this season at Philadelphia and at Dallas, and then have Seattle coming in week 3, there needs to be a level of buttoned up, everywhere against Philadelphia's defense in particular in week 1. They're going to, I think, just be more confident with a guy like Rachaad White on the field. Now, not at the expense if they believe Krosky Merritt is just a better runner and more explosive. I'm not saying he's not going to play, but I think White's played in a lot of big games, man. He's been in the backfield for a lot of big games over the last few years. I liked him when they signed him because I think he's a better runner, quite honestly, than some thought he was when he was signed. But I could see that. I think it's going to be interesting to see how many backs they just keep in general. Is it 3, which is essentially what they had last year after they lost Eckler, or will they keep 4? And if it's 4, is it Katron Allen as the 4th? Because if they keep 4, my guess is it's because they don't want to let McNichols go. He's too valuable on special teams. You know what? He's been valuable in the backfield. Talk about a guy that can do everything and is a veteran and they're comfortable with as a pass blocker. But if you keep 4 backs, where does that take from? Does it take from the wide receiver group? Where does that take from? We'll see. That's a good one. Let's get to Frank. Frank's calling from Boise. Frank, who's your breakout player in 2026? That can be a player that goes from obscurity to contributor, a player from contributor to really good, or from really good to elite. I gave out Chigakonkwo and Nick Cross, and Max gave out Johnny Newton. Who's your guy?
Hey, Kevin. Good morning.
Good morning,
yeah,
Frank.
You know what? Thank you. Hey, I like all of your guys' picks and all of the picks that have come up so far, except for maybe Drew Stevens. I'm not even sure he'll make the team. But my pick, Kevin, is and I missed the last call, so he might have been brought up. You were just talking about the running backs, and I agree about Rachaad White. I've always loved Rachaad. But my choice is Bill Krosky Merritt. I think he's going to have a big year. Kevin, and I think he's going to go for 13 to 1,400
Wow.
all-purpose yards.
Ooh, yeah.
He's been catching
Well,
the
the
ball a lot out of the
all-purpose
backfield
yard-
at camp.
The all-purpose yardage leader last year just got the largest deal in the history of the league for a running back at $25 million a year. Bijan Robinson, his announced earlier this morning. So yeah, no, the previous caller, Frank, also said Krosky Merritt. So there's some company for you there, and I don't think that's a bad one at all. I think it's a pretty good one. Here are the others that I wrote down. All right, I wrote down Johnny Newton. I actually also had Krosky Merritt on my list. I also had Trey Amos on my list. I also had Frankie Louvu on my list.
He's an all-pro.
I think there's I know, but you know what? You know who knows he was an all-pro 2 years ago? Nobody.
Yeah, fair.
Do you think
Only
Frankie
us.
Louvu is a household all-pro name? Not even close.
Fair point.
I thought Frankie Louvu in 2024 was really good. I thought he was their best, along with Wagner, with the way Wagner played. I thought he was their best defensive player. I think Louvu in this scheme could be really a headliner, a big-time headliner this year. And the other guy is, just because he has not been a Pro Bowler at this point, but Odafe Owe has the talent to blow up into an elite pass rusher. That's why they signed him to a 4-year, $96 million deal. They signed him to that deal because they think that he can be a guy that literally goes out and gets 12, 13, 14 sacks in a season. He's got that ability. And he's also got the ability to change games as a guy with his height, with his length, to bat balls down, to deflect balls, and to force fumbles. You know, he was exceptional in the postseason game against Drake May in New England. If they could have done anything offensively, they would have had a chance to win that game. Owe was great. Joshua in D.C., who's your breakout player in 2026?
Traylon Burks.
Okay. That's not a bad one, because first round pick, hasn't lived up to it. Had a couple of moments last year, including the one-handed snag against Denver in the back of the end zone. And the opportunity is certainly there for Traylon Burks to be a guy that ends up getting a bunch of targets as the number 2 in this scheme. That's a good one. Look, I mean, somebody might say anybody at wide receiver at this point. We got the Senate. We didn't get a Luke McCaffrey. I'm just looking at
I thought
Twitter
about it.
What, with McCaffrey?
Yeah, I thought about naming him. I mean, it's going to be I'm pounding my head against the wall until it actually happens. But every time I'm open and we talk about the play-by-play from camp and all that, but a lot of times Luke McCaffrey comes away the winner from camp. Now, will that translate? I don't know. I don't think so. But who knows?
You know who thinks it's going to translate? Logan. Logan said the other day he really likes Luke McCaffrey to break out this year. He feels good about McCaffrey.
I hope
just
so.
has a feeling about where he is. I mean, I'll tell you one thing he did really well last year: return kickoffs once Debo, got banged up.
That's true.
And stopped doing it. They were a good punt return team and a good kickoff return team. How about adding, a middle of the pack defense to that? And let's see what this team can be, because they have not had a defensive team. All right, I promised you that on this Mike Sando list of the best quarterbacks as voted on by general managers and head coaches and assistant coaches around the league, Jaden came in at 13th, a tier 2 quarterback. A lot of questions about him. Last year, this time, he was 6th, and I'll go back and read some of what was said about him a year ago. It's always, with almost anybody, including coaches and general managers, what did I last see? That's what it is. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, and the team980.com. How about the disaster that is developing in San Francisco at wide receiver? Mike Evans now on the injury list.
I think we got to start looking into this substation business, Kevin.
Yeah, Evans, Pearsall, obviously Brandon Ayuk is essentially estranged from the team. You're not getting Kittle back for a while. Christian Kirk is banged up. Right now, the only healthy wide receiver in San Francisco of note, not including some of their undrafted free agents, etc., is Deebo Samuel. Man, the 49ers just seem to, year in and year out, be a team that deals with injuries. Now, last year was the first year that they were an injured football team and overcame it and ended up in the postseason. Previous years, they cratered. We'll see what happens this year and whether or not when we get to the opener for them in Australia against the Rams on Thursday night, September 10th. We'll see who's dressed and who isn't. So earlier in the show, we shared with you the Mike Sando from the Athletic quarterback tiers list. 50, some odd general managers, assistant general managers, coaches, and assistant coaches vote on 35 veteran quarterbacks, and none of the rookie quarterbacks are included. So no Ty Simpson or Fernando Mendoza in this. And they put them into tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and in this case, this year you have just tier 4. Last year, Jaden Daniels was 6 at the top of tier 2. This year, he's in tier 2, but he's at 13 overall. He's in the middle, if you will, or towards the back end of tier 2. And I read to you some of the things that were said about Jaden Daniels. He's got to reprove it. He's a legitimate ascending 2, but it's his health. Took off and ran too much last year. He's got to settle into the position, has talent. Similar to Lamar, when he can't run, he's just a tier 3 quarterback. And then you go back to last year when he was the number 1 quarterback in tier 2 below the top 5 quarterbacks in the league, Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Jackson, and Stafford. And no one was talking about him taking off and running too quickly. No one was talking about injuries, none of that. Here are some of the quotes. First of all, Jaden was the highest debuting rookie quarterback on that list of all time. Even C.J. Stroud wasn't close to the number of votes he got. Jaden got 17 first-place votes, which was in total 13, which were in total 13 more than the rest of the starting NFC East quarterbacks combined. Here were some of the quotes about him from a defensive coordinator. What I respect most is it never seems too big for him. He'll stand in the pocket and deliver the ball. And then when he starts running around, that's a problem. Another defensive coordinator. He can run. He can throw with accuracy. He's really calm. This S, 4-letter word, ain't too big for him. And it's easy to see when you're playing him. He doesn't get flustered. From one voter, he's the best passer in our division. This was an NFC East voter. He's really good. This year on the list, a year later, both Dak Prescott's ahead of him. Jalen Hurts is actually behind him. Jackson Dart's behind him as well. Another quote from a defensive coordinator. The dude's got an arm, he's got legs, and he has processing. He just took his team to the championship game with a non-championship caliber roster. I think he's tremendous, a head coach said about Daniels. I don't want to one him, meaning tier 1 him, because I want to see another year. Get me halfway through the second year and I'll have a good feel. The defensive coordinators will have had their shot at him. Well, of course, as we know, they didn't have much of a shot at him because he didn't get a chance to play much. So what a difference a year makes. They still didn't drop him at a super high level. Remember last year after C.J. Stroud ended up in the top 7, he dropped to number 10 after his sophomore season. And there were other names on the list last year that aren't anywhere near the list this year. It's interesting, I think just like the ESPN list, it's always interesting to me to see what actual people in the league think. More than beat reporters and columnists. What do the guys in the league actually think of these players, which is why that ESPN list is interesting position by position. And this one, Sando's been doing it for several years, is interesting as well. I will say this. I think they've got the tier 1 quarterbacks correct. I think right now the 4 best quarterbacks in the game are Allen, Mahomes was 1 here. Mahomes, Allen, Stafford, and Burrow. I think after that, because Lamar hasn't done it in the big spots yet, I still think Lamar is close when he's healthy. He's really going to have to, at some point in his career, get it done in the postseason. Quarterbacks are judged on that, even though it's sometimes unfair. I think with him, it's been fair. He hasn't played well in a lot of those games. His postseason record, not great. Justin Herbert, until he does it in big games like Lamar, he's not a tier 1 quarterback. He's not anywhere near it. He's also performed poorly in some of his biggest games. Dak Prescott isn't that much different. Hasn't come up big in the biggest games of his career. Drake May last year, my God, night and day compared to Jaden in the postseason from 24. I mean, you cannot compare Drake May or Caleb Williams in their playoff games to what Jaden Daniels did in his. Jaden Daniels was a superstar in the postseason in 2024. Drake May was objectively horrible in the postseason games. Caleb Williams was pretty good and exciting, but wasn't Jaden in those games. Jordan Love has to deliver a little bit more in big spots. See, I think with these elite level quarterbacks, what we've seen is incredible performances in the regular season, but we've seen them do it in the postseason. And you can say, well, Josh Allen hasn't gotten his team to a Super Bowl. Yeah, but it's not because of him. He's had excellent, memorable playoff games, incredible playoff games. Some of those games against the Chiefs, obviously the 42-36 overtime game when he gave them the lead with 13 seconds to go, and then they lost in overtime without touching the football before the rule changed. One of the great playoff games in the history of the league. I thought last year his performance against Jacksonville was the best of the postseason. And there was a lot of blame on him in that divisional round loss against Denver, but they would have had no chance without him in that game, which can be said at the same time. Stafford, Burrow, they've both performed incredibly well in big games. Those are your 4 tier 1 guys. That's it. That's the list. No one else deserves to be on that list right now. If Jaden had had an injury-free year and it had approached, even if it didn't match 2024, I think we'd be talking about him, or maybe just outside that tier. It would have depended on what they did had they gotten to the postseason. Lamar can't be in that tier. I'm sorry. I love Lamar Jackson, too. He's a player that I love watching play. But his playoff career is littered with average to subpar performances. It just is. And until he gets that team to a Super Bowl with him playing at a high level, I don't know that you can really, I don't think you can really put him in that level. His postseason numbers, I mean, in some of these games you'll remember, but overall, he, in 8 playoff games where they've lost as a favorite 3 times, 60.6% completion percentage, 1,753 yards in 6 games. 10 touchdowns, throwing 7 interceptions. He's taken 29 sacks and he's fumbled 5 times. Lamar just had I thought he played okay in that lead up to the Chiefs game, in the title game, but then didn't. I thought he played okay in that Buffalo loss a couple of years ago. May have been his best overall playoff game. I'd have to go find the actual stats from that game for him against Buffalo, because I thought he did play well, and they obviously had a chance, but he had a turnover late in that game too. Yeah, he was pretty good in that game. 2 TDs, a pick, 254. Yeah. Been tough for Lamar in the playoffs. I like the Sando list at the top. I think it's absolutely the right list. 4 truly elite level quarterbacks in the NFL. And then a couple of guys that you could see being, on that list with better performances in big games. And in the case of like a Jaden Daniels, just getting back to being healthy for 17. I was listening to the Greenberg show this morning, Get Up. Jeremy Fowler was on it. Jeremy Fowler, we had on the show last week. He was actually at Washington's camp the last couple of days. And, he said, and I was glad to hear him say this, because I think a lot of the national guys don't start with this. But when you get to, well, what happened to Jaden Daniels? If your first answer out of your mouth as a football reporter or columnist or, TV pundit or radio talk host isn't, well, he barely played football. He was injured most of the year. If that isn't your first answer and you start getting into, well, he ran too quickly, he didn't process, he wasn't accurate, he's injury prone, etc. The injury prone, there's something to it. But he did say something that I did find interesting, because he did lead with, look, he didn't play much. He played in 7 games. He didn't take it to the next level, which I've done to emphasize how little he played last year, which is to say out of 17 games, he actually only played in 4 start to finish, and in 3 start to finish completely healthy. That's just a fact. The games that he played in start to finish completely healthy were the Giants opener, the Chargers game, and the Bears game. The Green Bay game, he played start to finish in, but he got hurt late in the 3rd quarter and played injured in the 4th quarter. If your answer doesn't start with, well, it's hard to evaluate him because he didn't play much football, then I think you're an idiot. But the other thing, and Jeremy Fowler essentially started the answer that way, which I think is good, because a lot of guys in his business I've heard start with, oh man, he really regressed. I mean, his footwork, terrible, the processing, really? In which games? So then the other thing Fowler said is, and it may not have been Fowler, it was part of the overall conversation, and if it wasn't him and it was somebody else, I'm just forgetting who it was. May have been Jason McCourty, who, by the way, is going to join. He's going to fill in for that Ryan Clark spot on the pregame Monday Night Football show with Scott on ESPN. But they said a lot of the pre-draft concerns became, or the pre-draft concern about him and his frame and his ability to stay healthy, worst fears realized last year. He's got to prove that he can play and be available. I am not going to debate the fact that that was a discussion point, but it wasn't a discussion point based on him having an injury-plagued college career. It was projecting what that body would look like and how it would hold up at the NFL level. Because as a college player, he started and played in 52 of 54 games at Arizona State and LSU. All right, we'll get in depth with the Nats trades from yesterday next. Nats made 2 more trades yesterday to go with the 2 that they had already made. Curtis Mead was dealt last week. Luis Garcia Jr. over the weekend. They dealt Foster Griffin to Cleveland. And there was another minor trade as well. They've lost 6 games in a row. They lost last night in Philadelphia 6-3. By the way, Bryce Harper in that game with a 2-run homer. I think that's back-to-back games with Harper going deep for the Phillies, who were actually really struggling. They got swept by the Marlins last week, and they had fallen, into that second wild card position in the National League. But they've gotten healthier with 2 wins over Baltimore and now a win last night over a Washington team. And I was watching this game early. Per usual, they jumped out to an actual lead. They had a 3-0 lead. Lyle homered in the second to give them a 3-0 lead. James Wood was banged up in the game. There's some imaging perhaps today. But the real story here is that the Nats over the last week have gone from, hey, maybe this team can actually be a legitimate contender going deep into September, to a different roster because of trades and in the midst of a 6-game losing skid. A lot of the excitement was pinned. And that sound you hear is air being leaked out of what was, I thought, a fun balloon there for a few weeks. Do we have Toby? Okay, good. Toby Altizer is with me. Toby, of course, with 106.7 The Fan, and he does Nationals post-games shows on 106.7 The Fan, the host of that, and the, of course, station that carries all of our Nats games. All right. So I said earlier, Toby, in the show that I understand there's a big picture part to this. I do, and I'm not against it, and I liked what they did during the 2010s. Obviously, there was a great 8-year run, being in the postseason 5 times, winning a World Series. But sometimes I think you got to try to win to become good at winning. And this team was on the verge of doing that, I think, until this losing streak. So I'll start there. Of the trades that were made, how many don't get made if they split with the Braves over the weekend?
I would say the Foster Griffin deal would have maybe been a little more difficult, or maybe would have been something that the price tag would have been a little bit higher. And in turn, maybe if no one reaches that price tag, you're more prone to just hold on to them. I think it made it pretty easy to move on from Foster Griffin when you look at where they were at in the standings going into the deadline, and now, losing 6 in a row after losing again last night. And I think, to your point, Kevin, I think you saw Foster Griffin had even mentioned that he was being a little bit affected, and Blake had mentioned that Foster was a bit affected in his last start where he didn't look quite like himself. I think the team overall looked a little bit lifeless and unlike what we'd seen this team play like over the last couple of months. And I feel like that kind of carried over. We'll see how they bounce back once again today in the Philly series. But it feels like, this team, maybe they just weren't ready for the moment of, hey, we got to put up or shut up time to go win some ball games here to force Taboni's hand. And I think that little bit of extra pressure for this team that's played so free and they've been a fun group to watch, I think that little bit of added pressure, which it's not the same as playoff pressure, but it's, closer to that than the lack of pressure they've had the last couple of years. I think it maybe was something that they weren't fully accustomed to, and in turn, they looked a little bit uncharacteristic for this season. But I think to answer your question, Foster's probably the only one that I think really got affected by that Brave series.
Luis Garcia Jr. last night in his debut for the Yankees put him ahead with a homer in the 7th. They ended up losing that game 13-7, but he's been just absolutely on fire. I would have loved to have seen him stay, but I understand what they got. Before we get to the trades, and I want to get your opinion on each of them, even going back to the Curtis Mead trade, and sort of what it overall says about Taboni and company and where their mindset is. Last night, James Wood was injured. What do we know about this? Is there any concern that it could be serious?
I mean, potentially, anytime you see somebody swing a bat and they immediately grimace and grab a side, that's just not something you want to see. So I haven't seen anything today about any results or anything. I'm sure we'll find out pregame from Butera. He was going to go for an MRI taken out last night. Dylan Cruz took his spot. So hopefully it's something minor. It's the one hallmark of James Wood that he's done a great job of throughout his career is he doesn't miss games. I mean, he played in every single game, playing in the leadoff spot, whether DHing or playing in a corner outfield spot this entire season. So hopefully he's okay, but it is a little concerning when you see a guy swing a bat and immediately grimace, and that's what we saw last night.
All right. I want to go through each one of these trades individually, but I'll just start with, I don't want to bury the lead. Overall, how do you think Paul Taboni and company did over the last week?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one, Kevin. Honestly, I think if you want to be full prospect nerd and try to approach it that way, I think a lot of people are pretty happy with that. But I think for the average fan, they're not real thrilled with the return. And I think I'm probably somewhere in between. I don't think you can give him an A. I think going back to the Connolly early Curtis Mead trade, I think that one's totally fine. That's a move that you're trading from a strength to get something that you're weak at. And that's kind of what Boston did as well. And so you shake hands on that one and feel pretty good about it. But trading Luis Garcia, it's not like you got a big-time prospect. Trading away Foster Griffin, it's not like you got a big-time prospect. So, I think it's hard for the average fan to look at that and say, oh, let's give them a high grade. So I would say that Taboni went quantity over quality with these guys, and it's something that we're still trying to see if they can develop pitching. We've seen them be able to develop hitting at a pretty high level. Haven't necessarily seen that on the pitching side. So maybe their thought process is let's just get a bunch of arms in here and hope we can hit with one or two of them or, maybe more if that's the case. But I have a hard time giving them a super high grade. I guess I'll go with like a B minus somewhere in there just because I trust what they're doing. But at the same point, it's not like they got anybody that you're, super thrilled to see in the system now, even though there's some guys with some really good traits.
And some guys that are like a little bit more advanced, right? What does it say about getting guys a little bit further along rather than true, like down the road prospects?
Well, I think it tells you that they feel like they're trying to build this thing up so they can compete next year. I mean, that's a good sign for Nationals fans is that, they got guys that should be able to help them. There's some guys that'll pitch out of the pen this season, if not, tonight for this team. There's guys that are going to be pitching for this team, whether in the starting rotation or out of the pen at some point next season. So, they're getting guys in here that are going to help them out. But, I think that's kind of the quandary there for Paul Taboni. Do I want to get guys that are closer to the big leagues, but maybe not as highly thought of or don't have as high of a ceiling? Or do I want to try to get some guys that are a little lower down that we're going to still have to spend plenty of time to develop, but we might not see until 2028, 2029, but their ceiling's a little bit higher. And he opted to go with guys that are a little bit closer to the big leagues and a number of them. And so I think he talked to the junkies multiple times and brought up the idea of buying and selling. And I don't know that you would say that he did much buying, but when he did his selling, he made sure to get things that would be able to help them soon. And so I think that is something that, is a little bit of a message to the clubhouse that, hey, even though the playoff odds are very low, if you can get on a little bit of a hot streak, we'll try to get you some relief help in this season. And even though we traded away the best starting pitcher, even though, two of the four best bats for this team are gone, if you can get on a hot streak, we at least added some guys that could help out this season in these trades. But, there's no question they're a worse team today than they were a couple of weeks ago when they still had the guys that they traded away.
At Toby_Altizer, Altizer. Give me the top 2 or 3 of the return on these trades that are going to help them the quickest.
Yeah, so Giovanni Cruz is the one that I think will immediately step in, and he's going to be available out of the pen. And he's kind of moved around. He was signed as an international signing by the Cubs back in 2016, but he's still only 26 years old. So younger guy that's been moved around, but he's got like a triple-digit fastball. That's someone that could help you out of the pen. And Grant had asked him about Ben Grable, another guy brought over in the Yankees trade, and that's somebody who's in Double-A, but he's got a really good fastball by just some of the metrics and different things. And I think he's someone that maybe not, in the next month or so, but maybe he gets a taste of the big leagues at the end of the season, and he could be here as early next season if that's not the case. And he's someone that I think fans are going to really, really like. Firm fastball, good IVB for people that are nerdy baseball people. He's got a really good analytics model for what he's able to do with his pitch mix. And then I think Will Dion is someone that they got in the Foster Griffin trade that his results haven't been great at the big league level, but they clearly are going after some guys with some interesting traits. He's got a super high arm angle, good vert on his fastball as well, but he's pitched to like a 4.5 ERA. So it's not like he's been overly effective in his time in the big leagues either, but he'll probably pitch for this team out of the pen at some point down the stretch here as well. So they've got some guys, and they needed help out of the bullpen in any form, and I think they got some arms that should be better than what they've been working with. But again, it's not like that's a very high bar to clear.
Of the players they traded, let's just focus on Meade, Garcia Jr., and Griffin. Who do you think the most likely to continue what we're doing this year in the future of those three? Which is the most likely to actually continue with a really solid career from these career years?
Yeah, it's interesting because I have confidence that all three will recapture, some of what they've done here, but it's hard because the answer for me is Curtis Meade, but I need him to come back from the injury because I thought that he was going to be fantastic for Boston. I think that's why they felt they could make that deal. He feels kind of tailor-made to swing the bat at Fenway and just hit so many balls off the monster out there in left field. But I think that he's going to be the best of them, Kevin. And I think it's maybe as simple as he was once a top 50 prospect on the baseball. But I think a hallmark of really good franchises across Major League Baseball is they identify guys like that. The Brewers do it. They've done it with Kyle Harrison this year, who's turned into one of the best starters in the National League. He's been injured for a little bit, but before he got hurt, he was pitching to basically a sub-2 ERA. That was a once-top prospect that got moved from San Francisco to Boston in the Rafael Devers deal, and then he ends up in Milwaukee, and they turn him into a good player. They did the same thing with Andrew Vaughn, who was a top 100 prospect at one, was very good, and then they turned him into their best hitter probably down the stretch and in the playoffs last year. And that's something that I think is a hallmark of really good organizations is, Curtis Meade was once a top prospect, didn't work out with the Rays, didn't work out with the White Sox. He comes over here and all of a sudden he figures out what his potential was all this time, which is to be a really good hitter, middle of the order type of bat. And so I think him going to Boston and continuing to figure what that is, that system that works for him. And maybe part of it was confidence. He talked about that being back with Blake Butera, who had managed him in the minor leagues. And so I think Curtis is going to be really good in Boston. It was unfortunate to see him get injured basically right away in his first game out there in Boston, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if we get down the line and Boston looks back at the deal and they're thrilled with what they got back at Curtis Meade. The Nationals are like, yeah, we do the trade 100 times out of 100 too, because we like what we got out of Connerly early. So I think that one's going to be a both sides are happy type of deal, and I think Meade's going to be a really good player in Boston.
You happy they didn't trade C.J. Abrams? I mean, I didn't think they would when we got to it, but certainly before the season started, I think a lot of people pointed to this week and said this would be the last one for C.J. Abrams.
Yeah, I think, frankly, Kevin, it's funny. I kind of assumed that they would trade him at the deadline before the season as well, and this is a totally different C.J. Abrams. Like, I think that if CJ were the same player he'd been the last couple of seasons, maybe he is on his way out, but he's turned himself into a legitimate MVP candidate. And I think as an executive, sometimes you've got to realize that we're still working with people here, and you're not just working with numbers on a page. You've got to make sure that you're factoring in the human element of it. And I think if they would have traded CJ, it would have obviously been a massive return, but probably not worth what you're going to do to that clubhouse in terms of the way the guys feel about the organization, the way guys feel about you as an executive and those sorts of things. So I felt like it was pretty much off the table, but I think you saw Boston's return to Baltimore for Adley Rutschman. I would not be surprised if a lot of that package was ready to go for CJ Abrams and the Nationals just weren't willing to pull the trigger on that. So, I mean, they'll probably still trade him in the offseason, Kevin, which stinks, but at the same point, you get to have a full season with James playing the way that he's played, and hopefully he's okay, and CJ playing at the level he has, and hopefully he gets back out of his little bit of a rut there. But yeah, not surprised that they didn't opt to move him, but I also think the way that he's played this season, I mean, it's a totally different guy and made it almost impossible to do in the middle of the season without kind of tearing that clubhouse a little bit apart when it's still Paul Taboni's first season.
I was going to ask you about the Orioles-Red Sox trade, the Rutschman trade. I mean, people are killing the Red Sox for giving up that much for a player who obviously isn't the player he was a few years ago. How did you sort of evaluate that trade from the Boston perspective?
I thought it was a big-time overpay. We'll see. I mean, Rutschman's a good player when he's healthy, but he's been on the injured list feels like more than he's actually played the last couple of seasons, and he can still be impactful. But I thought maybe one of the arms would be going back to Baltimore, either Ianson or Witherspoon, but turns out they get both of them and they get some other guys on top of it. I thought it was a massive overpay, but I think it's something that Boston, Craig Breslow, he was kind of working for his job there for a large portion of the season before they turned it around. And so I think they're still probably in a desperation mode to make sure that they don't fall off a cliff at any point, keep rolling, get into the postseason and see what happens. And he keeps his job for another season versus if they at some point were to implode, you'd rather just make sure that you keep your job. So maybe he was willing to do some more overpays than usual, but they were very aggressive in making some of the moves that they did and gave up some high quality prospects. But at the same point, the ultimate goal is to win a World Series. And so prospects, maybe they're not going to win you a World Series this season, likely. Maybe they can in the future, but I think he wanted to be aggressive and make sure that he kept his job. And I thought it was an overpay. I think it's a good deal for the Orioles, but we'll see what the Red Sox can do.
All right, Toby's been out at camp with Grant this week because I think Max said that Danny was off this week doing shows, watching training camp. I'll ask you a couple of questions to exit here about our football team. Number one is, has anybody just stood out to the point where it was hard for you to sort of take your eyes off that particular player because he looked different, he looked good, and you feel really confident about him?
Yeah, I'll start. Yesterday was the first day in pads, and when the pads were on, you couldn't help but notice number 52, Sonny Styles. And you certainly hope so when you draft a off-ball linebacker, number 7 overall. You hope they're going to stand out. But, I mean, immediately, just seeing the guy in pads, that's a different-looking human. And then immediately, when you start, it's the first rep of 11 on 11, and I believe it was 2s against 2s, but Bill gets the handoff, and who meets him right there in the hole? It's Sonny Styles. And you saw that all day, him flying around, really good against the run. His movement skills are off the charts. So I would say Sonny has really stood out. And I think the tight end group as a whole has stood out. Not necessarily always the same guy, but, Chigakonkwo will have a day. Ben Sinnott's had a couple of days out here. Colson Yankoff has been really good at times. So I think those would be the ones that I would highlight as the ones that have stood out.
All right, I'll finish with this. We asked callers this in the first hour, typical training camp topic this time of year. Give me the player that you see breaking out in 26, going from obscure to major contributor, from contributor to really good, from good to elite. Give me that one or two players that you think will have a breakout year in the upcoming season.
Yeah, so I'll go with, I've been banging this drum, and so maybe it's a little bit of I want this guy to be good this season. I kind of see what I want to see, but I think Bill looks like he's going to have a year this year. He looks a little bit stronger this season, and I think the thing that stood out the most to me, Kevin, his hands have been probably the thing that's stood out individually of the individual skill set the most of anybody at camp. It was questionable last season. This year, even a couple of times today, snatching one nearly off the dirt and just making plays out of the backfield. I think he's already built to run in the style of run scheme that they're going to use him in. And so I would think that he's going to run the ball really well. It's basically about holding on the football, not fumbling. But I think his hands have largely improved this season, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him really explode onto the scene. And another one, he hasn't been here, so I don't know what you would classify him as, where you would say, but I think Odafe Oweh is going to have a good year this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see him put up double-digit sacks. He looks like a monster coming off the edge, and I think the way that this defense is going to be working, the way that they're going to have different guys coming from different places, he's going to get one-on-ones, and I think he's going to win those a lot of times. And, he talked about this a little bit earlier in the week about how he went from being just a run stuffer when he came out of college to now having some real pass rush ability, and I think you've seen some of that here at training camp, and I think he's going to have a big year. So I'll say Bill and Oweh.
About 3 or 4 callers said Krosky Merritt. So you're on that. And we talked to, I think Denton yesterday really liked the way Krosky Merritt looked as well. Toby, thanks. Keep up the good work, man. I love listening to you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Kevin. Thanks.
Toby Altizer, everybody. He does a great job. Really does everything he does on 106.7 The Fan. All right, when we come back, I mentioned that I had a conversation with our old producer on this show, Denton Day, who's been at camp every single day since last Wednesday. You'll hear his thoughts on what he's seen from Ashburn next. Denton Day, old producer of this show, one of my favorite people, a good friend, doing a lot of work for both stations, our station, the Team 980, and 106.7 The Fan. He is the host of the Commanders pre- and post-game shows on this station. Not going to do, I don't think, preseason games, but he'll start with week one against the Eagles, doing pre- and post-game with Linnell and others, and he does a great job of doing that. He is a co-host with Linnell on a show that airs overnight on Westwood One stations, and he continues to do a lot of college football for Sirius XM. He joined me yesterday on my podcast to talk about what he's seen at camp. He's been out there since the veterans arrived last Wednesday, and I began by asking him about the area of the team. We've had this conversation amongst ourselves. The area of the team, other than the quarterback, because Denton is a big Jaden Daniels fan as well, other than the quarterback that he feels best about. Here's what he said.
I'll give you one on both sides of the ball. I think the running back room on offense, I feel very, very good about. I think they have a bunch of dudes that can do a bunch of different things. Bill is going to be primary, I think, running back one, but I don't know that he's like a 250 touches a season kind of a guy. I think they have a very nice dynamic with him, with Rashad White, with what I believe is going to be Katron Allen, though I have to admit, Jeremy McNichols has looked pretty good through the first couple of days of camp. We didn't get to see a ton from the running backs with pads today. I was a little bummed about that, but I feel overall on offense pretty good about that particular room. And then on the other side, the linebackers, and that's basically because of one specific player in Sonny Styles. But man, dude, the first 4 days of camp, and especially with pads today, he looks every bit the part. He's living up to every bit of the hype. I just can't wait to see it in actual games when it matters, not when he's kind of going still 75% in camp.
You're the first person that's come on the show, radio or podcast, talking running backs that has not mentioned Rashad White. Why?
Why? So first of all, I think Rashad White's been looking really, really good. Bill is getting a lot more of the reps at the ones at the moment, or at least when they're calling designed run plays, he's getting a lot more of those. I think Rashad White's looked very good, but just the first couple of days of camp, Bill has been the guy that he stood out to me a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm going to be surprised personally when the real games get here if Rashad White isn't equal or higher on snap counts early in the season, more than Bill. I like Bill's talent, don't get me wrong, and I think he's going to be a significant part of what they do in the running game itself. But going to Philly, going to Dallas, they're going to want a veteran presence there as a pass blocker, as a runner, and as a pass catcher. And I just have this sense that when they get to the real opponents, Rashad White's going to be a big part of the attack. It sounds to me like you would disagree with that and say you think Bill will end up getting the majority of snaps.
No.
Okay.
I think you're right with the split. I think it'll be primary, probably 40-40, and then maybe 10% or like 8% goes to either Katron Allen, Jerome Ford, or McNichols, whoever is the third running back. I think it'll be a nice split. It's just the first couple of days I've seen a little bit more from Bill than I have from Rashad White. But once they get the pads on consistently, I think you'll see more from him in pass game stuff. Well, he's gonna score on one of these early weeks on a wheel route. I know they're setting up. They're gonna bring him out of the backfield. It's gonna be him on a linebacker, and that linebacker's not gonna stand a chance.
You know, you essentially mentioned 4 running backs that'll be on the final roster because McNichols obviously is their best special teamer, and you like Katron Allen, and I know they do as well. You think they're going to keep 4 backs?
I do think that they'll keep 4. What I don't know is where that's going to take another spot from, because the wide receivers are another really interesting battle, a couple interesting battles going on, especially if they sign a particular Maryland alumni, hopefully coming up here soon. So I don't know who's going to be the odd man out, because another guy that's looked halfway decent and plays special teams is Jerome Ford. Now, I wouldn't expect him to be on the roster. He's kind of like done this 3 years in a row now, it feels like, where he's kind of looked good at camp and they just go another direction. But that running back position is going to be interesting. Maybe you can sneak Katron Allen onto the practice squad. He's not running a ton of teams, and like you mentioned, Jeremy McNichols can do a bunch of different things, whether that's blocking, returning, whatever.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned a couple of players defensively. I'm going to ask you what I asked Logan on Friday's show. Who's going to lead this team in sacks?
That's if I'm here, let me give you odds on that. I think Odefe Owe is going to be like the big time favorite, and he's gotten some reps, not a lot of reps, but he's gotten some reps against Laramie Tunsil, and he's not losing. There's a couple of times where he's gotten the better of Laramie Tunsil in a way where I was, hopeful. I was like, hey, hopefully he's going to be a game wrecker, but I didn't know that I had him beating Tunsil the way that he has a couple of times. So Odefe always looked really good. Caleb on Chason is, if you're looking for like sneaky value on who's going to lead the team in sacks, it's him. I think he's looked really, really good, and he's getting reps against Connerly and Laramie Tunsil. They're doing some flip in. He also drops into coverage a little bit, which not like my favorite thing in the world, but I think he's really versatile. So I think with a lot of attention paid to Odefe Owe, I think Caleb on Chason could be the guy that ends up leading the team in sacks. In a perfect world, both of those guys go for double digits, but we'll just stick with Chason saying I think he could be something this year.
I love the way you just kind of threw out, in a perfect world, they both go for double-digit sacks. I have no idea when this team last had two players with double-digit sacks, but I bet it's been a while. 2022, no. I don't think we had two players with double-digit sacks. I'll look it up and give it to all of you listening at the end of this show. But your overarching point is a good one, which is they're just going to be better there. I mentioned in the open, Denton, they added 9 new players on defense, all of whom have legitimate expectations. Like, even if they don't get half of them right, still 4.5 new significant contributors is going to lift this defense. I just think it would be hard to, and by the way, Dorrance Armstrong will be coming back. Let's not forget about him, but it would be hard to believe, hard to imagine this defense not being improved this coming season compared to what it was last year.
No, they can't. I mean, we learned last year on defense that there is a such thing as having nobody that can get after the passer. Just from that standpoint, they're so much better. Because you're right, like we've seen Dorrance. He's been out there, but obviously he's not practicing. Yeah. So he still looks to be in good shape. Obviously, football shape versus just looking at him are very different things. So once he gets back, once Dietrich Wise gets back, I mean, they got a lot of depth at the defensive line. Because another guy that's looked pretty good is the rookie from Tennessee, Joshua Joseph. He's gotten some really good reps, and he has a lot of things, like just the God-given stuff that I think makes a defensive coordinator and a defensive line coach really, really excited. As long as they develop him throughout the course of the year, he could be a guy that comes down on some of those primary passing downs, like a third down and long. Hey, pin your ears back and go. And I think he could be a guy that makes a couple of big plays down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, Logan mentioned Josephs as well as a player that he thinks could end up making a bigger contribution this year than many fans think. So right now, like on the back end, no Trey Amos yet. Do you think they signed Rasul Douglas because they were concerned about Amos, or do you think they signed Rasul Douglas because they feel like he's actually a player that can give them something right now that some of their other players can't give them?
Probably more the latter than the former, just because without him and without Amos, when Amos wasn't practicing, they just didn't have a lot of bodies out there. And then they have some guys that were on the team last year, like Biggers is out there, Hamilton is out there, but those aren't guys that you're getting super excited about in camp. And it's not like we're over the moon and excited about Rasul, but just putting him out there, he already made a play. He ended practice last week with a pick 6 on Mariota. So I think just the addition of him, I could see him in their mind at least being in a kind of a similar spot to what Jonathan Jones was last year, where he's a veteran presence that where you can rely on to come in and give you some good quality work on the outside. So I don't think it's that they're overly concerned about Amos. He's like jogging around some of the time at practice too. So eventually he should be back on the field. He's not like sprinting or anything like that, but Amos is out there. He's moving. He's hard to miss. His chain's icy as hell. So he's hard to miss out there. I'm hoping that he gets back relatively soon.
All right. I think you may have already answered this question with Joshua Josephs, but give me a player on defense that you've been talking to your friends about and people even out there that you think is going to make a bigger contribution than most think.
Yeah, Josephs would be the one on the defensive side, though we've had a lot of conversations about Nick Cross because he kind of flies around the football a little bit. We didn't get any major collisions in the first day of pads. I may or may not have been taking bets on the sideline with some of the people out there as to who's going to be the first one to really get the fans loud by colliding. We didn't get any of those on Monday, but I think Nick Cross is a guy that he's getting a lot of reps at the starting spot on the safety position. And I know a lot of people have expectations for him, but I think he could be really, really good with what they're trying to do. But I would say, yeah, Josephs, to answer your question, Josephs would be the one where if he gets some quality snaps, we'll say like 10 to 15, maybe 17, I think he could make some good work out of that, at least in the early portion of the season. Then we'll kind of see what happens on the back half.
All right, we continue with Denton at the Denton Day on X. Give him a follow. So, how has Jaden looked to you since you've been out there?
He looks good. He's learning, and it's like I'm not taking this like big referendum on what he's doing. I see him processing a lot more than some of the other quarterbacks, which is positive. I think some of the other quarterbacks are just trying to get the ball out of their hands as quickly as possible, where it does look like Jaden is trying to go through all the progressions and understand what coverage is being played and how this particular play that we're running is going to look against this coverage so he can get familiar with it. When he's on, he's on. And I'm sure you have had many people come on and talk about this. The interior offensive line needs a little bit of help, specifically the center position. So at times it's been a little difficult to judge him. I mean, they were running a 2-minute drill at the end of practice today. And with Jaden's group, with the ones, it was tough because there was like 2 sacks. They couldn't block anybody up front. So they got to solidify that. But when he has time, he's picking the defense apart. He's doing some of the things that you and I are both very optimistic that he's going to do in 2026 that we didn't see a ton of in 2025. And he is the only quarterback, and I cannot stress this enough, he is the only quarterback that is not tucking and running in like 7-on-7s. I mean, the amount of times that I'd be rolling my eyes from like a Hartman or a Mariota, they tuck it on 7-on-7, like throw it. Just he's letting it loose. So I kind of like what I've seen from Jaden so far, albeit it's not perfect. But look, dude, if you're like perfect on day 4 of training camp, your standard for perfection isn't high enough. So I've been liking what I've seen from him.
So what about the center position? I mentioned, they signed a center, Trey Hill, over the weekend, and Allegretti's still out. Do you sense that there's any concern about him and his availability as camp goes on and then eventually when the season comes around?
I don't know that there's a concern about him from the team's perspective. I can tell you that I'm concerned about the center position. And even if Allegretti is fully healthy, it's not something he's done a lot over the course of his NFL career. So this is a guy that you're putting into a totally new spot on a year that's really, really important. I mean, I have expectations that they are going to make it to the postseason this year and that Jaden is going to look way more like 2024 than he did in 2025. But going out there with a guy that you're transitioning to center is a very, very bold move from the team. And I know they were in the market for Linderbaum and it didn't work because the Raiders gave him a truckload of money. But I don't know why they moved off of Biotish without a clear plan in place. So that has been a little bit alarming. We'll see when Allegretti gets back. I wish that we saw him today. I think we'll see him maybe at the end of the week, maybe. So I'd like to see him in pads before one of the first preseason games. But I'm definitely alarmed at that. And I'm also a little curious as to why, if the plan right now is that Paul is going to play left guard. I thought he played well there last year. If they're going to put him next to Laramie Tunsil, why are you not at least trying with the threes, Brandon Coleman at center? Like, if we're just going to throw, dust into the wind and hope that something becomes a guy that you can rely on, at least give him a couple of opportunities with the third team, just to see if he can do it. And they haven't really done that yet. So I've been a little confused by that.
Week 1 against Philly, Coleman or Paul at left guard?
I think it's going to be Chris Paul. I think he's getting a good amount of reps. Now they are interchanging with him, but I think it'll be Chris Paul. I do think we're in a spot where Brandon Coleman has to win the position back. And so he's going to really have to stand out in camp the rest of the way and in preseason games. My expectation is that it'll be Chris Paul.
wide receiver room, let's just say right now they don't add anybody else, and the 6 or 7 best of the group that they have right now is what they have when the season begins. What would that be for you? Would that be an area of concern, or have you seen enough, talked to enough people to believe that they'd be okay?
I would always be concerned without a legit wide receiver too. And, I can understand from a fan's perspective of like, oh, this is the year Luke's going to break out, or, oh, Jalen Lane, this is his year. You're asking a lot of guys that haven't really done this. And when you look at the wide receiver position, the only guy that's really had NFL success outside of Terry McLaurin is Van Jefferson. And he's running primarily with the 2s and the 3s right now. Like, I think Treylon Burks has a lot of intangibles that would make him a good wide receiver. We haven't seen that consistently over the course of his career. So while I do think that there are a lot of guys who have gotten better, I think Jalen Lane through the first couple of days has stood out in terms of his route running. He looks a lot smoother. He looks like an NFL wide receiver in a way that he really didn't last year. And I kind of picked up on that at OTAs and minicamp, but he's running against air. Like, it's really easy to look good against air. But I think the first few days of camp, he's looked really good. He actually had a really good day, I thought, today. So I like what I've seen from Jalen Lane, but I haven't seen nearly enough to be like, yep, that's a definitive wide receiver too. He could go for 800 yards. I just don't know if they have anybody there that I would rely on to do that outside of 17. So they're better than they were last year. I don't think there's any doubt about that, but they're still not at the level that I would hope they would be at, considering this is year number 3. You're eventually going to have to make a decision on what to do with Jaden from a pay standpoint. And there's a lot of pressure on the offensive coaching staff and on Adam Peters to be like, hey, this is year number 3. Like, you should have your guys in here now. And if they're not going out there and signing a Diggs or whoever, I would be a little concerned. I mean, they went and signed a center immediately when Allegretti went down. I don't know why the Diggs thing hasn't happened yet, if there are real legs there.
All right. Same question on offense that I gave you about defense. Give me a player that you really like right now that most people aren't paying attention to.
Jalen Lane is that for me. I think a lot of people are looking at Antonio Williams, number 14. And ironically, I actually thought he had a pretty good day today as well. But he's not running with the 1s. He's running primarily with the 2s and the 3s. Jalen Lane is getting some reps with Jaden Daniels, which I love to see. I think there is something with him to where I think this offense that David Blau is going to run is going to do a lot better of a job putting guys like him in space. And I think when you put the ball in his hands, he has the quickness to make guys miss, and then he has the speed to really turn an 8-yard play into the potential of a 20-yard play. So I would say right now Jalen Lane is the guy for me that I've been impressed with, and I think he could end up being a really important player for the team this season.
All right. I can't let you go without asking you a little bit about college football. We are less than 4 weeks away from week 0. Early in the season, we've got some massive games. I mean, week 2, Oklahoma at Michigan, Ohio State at Texas. Week 3, would you put LSU and Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss as the most anticipated 2026 game of the year right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's so much so that we just skated by Ohio State and Texas, who at that point are probably going to be 1 versus 2.
Yeah, like they were last year.
We skated by them completely because we wanted to see Ole Miss and LSU, and some of that is because of the Lane Kiffin stuff. But I also think that LSU as a team this year is going to be pretty good. I like Sam Levitt. I liked him at Arizona State. Last year he had the injuries.
Yeah,
I like Sam Levitt, though. I think LSU could be a really, really fun team this year, more than just the drama that their head coach brings.
No, and Chambliss and Lacey are back at Ole Miss. That'll be an insane environment for sure. I can't wait for that. And we're getting closer to that. Week 0, nothing big. TCU and North Carolina from Dublin. There's not much there. Week 1 is not a great week 1. You would agree, right?
Yeah, it's one of the lesser week 1s that we've seen. Last year we got Ohio State, Texas,
exactly,
number 1, and they pushed it to week 2 this year. So it's a little bit of a letdown, but at that point you're just getting everybody in action. So you'll get some highlight plays from Arch. Jeremiah Smith will probably go for like $140 in Ohio State's game. So it'll be a stat padding day for the people that could end up being Heisman candidates.
Yeah, I guess Louisville Ole Miss on that Sunday night, September 6th, Clemson LSU in prime time on that first Saturday. Those aren't bad games. Not the.
It's a different Clemson team this year.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they're coming in with a lot less, and maybe they like being the underdog. But this is one of the lesser Dabo teams that I think we've seen, at least on offense, in a couple of years.
All right, good job. Appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
Yep, appreciate it.
Denton Day, everybody. Up next, something Dan Quinn said earlier this morning about the team's newest acquisition. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. Don't forget, all of our training camp coverage on the Team 980 is presented by Xfinity. Score the most reliable Wi-Fi. One price, 5 years, guaranteed. Xfinity. Imagine that.
So you guys added Fabian Moreau today.
Yes.
Like, what does he add? What is the reason behind that one?
Yeah, I think versatility. He's got good playmaking experience, and so some of you also get to know him. So we've covered the team in the past. Fantastic teammate. So we're very much looking forward to him. He's been somebody that we've, obviously visited with for a while and have talked to, and so to get him to be part of the crew, we're excited. He'll work in just individual today, and we'll start ramping him up, in the days ahead.
Fabian Moreau, drafted here in the third round in 2017 out of UCLA. Played a lot of games here in Washington, had 6 career interceptions before moving on to Atlanta. Was with the Giants briefly, with Denver briefly, and in Minnesota with Brian Flores and Durante Jones the last 2 years. Versatility, can do a lot. And I always liked Fabian when he was here because he had some size, length, and could run. There were some corners here back then that couldn't run as much. But Fabian Moreau always stood out, especially this time of year, as a guy that could really motor. He's older now, obviously, 32 years old. But Fabian Moreau, another kind of veteran defensive back, added sort of post the heavy part of free agency. Rasul Douglas and now Fabian Moreau. Part of that is because of some of the banged up nature of their players, Trey Amos being, of course, the big one. Meantime, Witherspoon is on the retired reserved list. They put him out to pasture, it would seem. Fox made a decision, which is not a surprising one. Kevin Burkhardt, Tom Brady, Aaron Andrews, Tom Rinaldi, the number 1 Fox NFL crew in week 1 will be in Philadelphia at the Link for Washington and the Eagles at 4:25. That was always going to be the Fox big game of their doubleheader. They'll be on the call of that one week 1. Cannot wait for September 13th. All right, that'll do it for the day. Chris Russell's next.